Hey, and happy Wednesday. Generally we do these on Monday, but had a lot up in the air Monday and Tuesday. A lot of it dealt with, we've got plenty of court, but the judges have a conference at the end of this week, so they're not going to be here Thursday and Friday, and it's sort of put everything in a tailspin. We were trying to make the most out of a half week, and we had planned a little bit around it to try to keep this one a little lighter, but in Georgetown we got a double murder trial, so we probably won't finish that up as the day is the last day of court, and we may have to push off, and instead of doing this on next Monday, we might do it next Wednesday, just so that I can fill you in on that one. But a lot has happened. Simply putting together this trial roster really changes minds. You know, a lot of people will be like, I'm not pleading, Well, Joe Gause was one of those guys. He was charged with the murder of his girlfriend's new boyfriend. His name was Brandon Robinson. Joe and his wife or girlfriend were estranged, and she had kind of moved on. He follows her over where she is with Brandon Robinson. This was a December of 2022 case. He goes back. He follows to the house, then he goes back and picks up a few items, comes back to the house, and then hollers out DoorDash. Well, Mr. Robinson and his girlfriend know they haven't ordered DoorDash, but they're walking toward the door when Mr. Gause starts shooting through the door, and he ends up killing Brandon Robinson. He got 30 years. That'll be day for day. He is 33 years old. That should put him into his 60s before he is able to get out. But it was a plea to murder, and again, that's day for day. The victim's family, I guess you could say two victims, they were extremely happy with it. There's always a lot of debate, but unless you have been there, and some of you have, but they were extremely happy with the plea, even though he got 30 years, as opposed to, it could have gotten more. Pretty much the same thing occurred in Georgetown, the trial that's going on now, and we'll talk about later, where his ex had moved on with another guy, and Ronnie Todd is accused of killing both his ex and the boyfriend, and that trial is going on now in Georgetown. But of course, like I said, we'll have to break after today, and it'll probably take Monday to finish that up. So we'll let you know how that goes. A lot of other cases that went on this week off of this week's August 4th trial roster. We started again with a stand your ground hearing. That usually is like a mini trial, and we knew we didn't have a full term of court. So that stand your ground trial started Monday. I think that we still don't have a ruling on that yet, but that's what we were doing with that. That was not a murder. It was an attempted murder and a pointing and presenting a weapon type case. There was also a little bit of drugs involved. So we'll know more about that and report back, but a stand your ground hearing was held, and we're just waiting on the judge's order. Interesting thing about stand your ground, when we try regular trials, the burden is on the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. In a stand your ground trial, that is a motion by the defendant, and the defendant has to prove preponderance of the evidence. It's not nearly like beyond a reasonable doubt, but if you think of a seesaw, beyond a reasonable doubt is one person's way heavier than the other, 85 to 15. But a preponderance is 51-49. It's just tipping the scales. So again, we're waiting on an order. Travis Bromell was the first up for trial, but right after that mini trial. And he ended up pleading guilty to attempted armed robbery. He got 15 years on that charge. He pled guilty as charged and got 15 years. Jeff Harrelson's case, it was an assault and battery. That case was continued. I don't know the reason behind the continuance. Jose Guadalupe Garcia, grand larceny. The judge signed an order for competency evaluation. I tell you all the time, now this case is true build back in 2024, so it's not that old. But what you see is the defense attorney really drags their feet, don't want to do anything until, if he was a question about competency, this should have been raised day one, but it ain't. It's raised when it's on the trial roster, and we'll have to send him up and get an order of competency. So to an effect, he'll be housed. They'll have to do a evaluation, but that case was continued for the mental competency. There was a charge that was dismissed. It ain't all on the defendant. Sometimes it's on us, you know. When it hits the trial roster, it's time to fish or cut bait. And this was further on down the list, but apparently we were not ready to fish. So we dismissed that charge. That was a failure to stop for a blue light, a misdemeanor. There was unlawful placing a child at risk. The judge continued that as number 6 on there. A bench warrant was issued for Jose Riviera Martinez. In other words, he didn't show up to court. We had a domestic violence case here where the defense attorney made a motion to continue and filed that in July. So apparently that was continued, couldn't go forward. Ralph Jacobs pled guilty as charged to failure to stop for blue light and possession of cocaine. He was sentenced to, the big thing there is, again, it's 2 misdemeanors, but the big thing there is it is now on his record and would be used to enhance other stuff. We had a shoplifting case that was 10th on the roster, and that pled guilty and pled as charged. That person got 18 months for shoplifting. It was a small amount. It was $2,000 or less, but you can't tell a lot without reading the file. But it was an enhanced case, which drugs, shoplifting, theft, all of that, the big thing for us to keep in mind is that's an enhanceable offense. So even though it is a small shoplifting, the first time you shoplift a little stick of gum or hair products or anything else, the most you can get is 30 days. Second time you shoplift something really small or steal something, the most you can get for petty larceny or shoplifting is 30 days. But number 3 is sort of theft's version of 3 strikes and you're out. You steal that same stick of gum or the same hair products, and it's up to 10 years. That is because it's enhanced, and your prior record gives the judge the authority to sentence up to 10 years on that. Same with drugs. A lot of times you see these huge sentences, and how in the world? Well, that person's generally got 1 or 2 priors for drugs, and that's the way the statute is written. First time people aren't going to get very much time. That's just the way it is, especially for possession. We may disagree with it. I'm just telling you what the truth is, and that's the law. You can look it up. But the second and the third is enhanced. So it generally tends to much bigger sentences. That's sort of where we're at this week. I think we did a really good job with courts. We got a double murder going on in Georgetown. Stand your ground here. We didn't waste any time, but we were some way hampered. And I would guess that's a reason for all of these continuances, is because the judges also knew I'm not going to be here Thursday and Friday. So there's no reason to try to get through all of this Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Double murder, of course, couldn't be done in 3 days, but it'll probably roll into next week. And again, I'll update you on that, whether it's conviction or whatever, non-conviction. We'll let you know on that next week.